Okay, let's try and do a little bit more for this. Volume 3, part 3. Volume 1, part 3. Now where... I know we had finished this, okay. So it was then I joined the Knights of the Third Order on a journey to the Sal Forest. Sal, whatever. The Third Order routinely went on monster slaying expeditions in the area surrounding the capital. Where the Ghost Forest sat to the west, the Sal Forest was in the south. Once such expeditions had been more rare, but in recent years, monster slaying had become nearly routine. The capital would quickly be overwhelmed if the knights didn't make a point to face monsters and beat back the miasma as often as possible. Now that the saint had been summoned, they hoped the situation would gradually improve over time. They're all counting on you, Ira. Girl, you know you're the saint. Why are you calling Ira the saint? Though she's not officially the saint. I don't get it. Hold on. Stupid thing. Maybe she thinks that they're both the saint? I don't know. This expedition was a bit unusual in that researchers from the Research Institute of Medicinal Flora were accompanying the knights. Although the primary objective of the trip was monster slaying, once my colleagues heard I was going, they insisted on joining too. They weren't about to pass up a chance to collect herbs growing in the forest. Especially as there might be some we didn't yet have in the garden. This is going to be a first for all of us. Some researchers wanted time to survey this wild vegetation as well, but Johann rejected their proposal outright as protecting exploring researchers would distract the knights from their main objective. It was absurd enough to have researchers who were all but useless in a fight accompanying knights on this deadly expedition. The trip was only possible thanks to the indulgence of the Order. Since so many researchers wanted to go picking, I actually considered skipping the trip entirely to stay back at the Institute. I love the idea of a leisurely day spent on potion production, but Johann told me I was obligated to go, seeing as I was the one who wanted the herbs the most. And besides, Hawk asked you personally to go, so you kinda can't get out of that anyway. Hey, don't stray too far, Jude warned me when I was set out to harvest some herbs I spotted a little off the path. I quickly picked them and hurried back to Jude, but he only had more lecturing for me. This place is more peaceful than the western woods, but that doesn't mean there aren't any monsters. Make sure you tell me before you go anywhere. Sorry, I will. The monsters in Saul were supposed to be weaker, but that didn't mean they were absent, or they weren't still monsters. I knew I had to be careful, but after growing up in Japan, where I never had to be wary of my surroundings, it was hard not to just walk off to grab something I wanted without a second thought. I mean, the only thing you had to worry about back then was probably bears and wolves and stuff. And even then, those are dangerous, but still, probably not in your immediate area. Probably the worst you had to worry about were, I don't know, angry birds or something. I heard Albert chuckle behind us. I've got my eye on her. She'll be alright as long as she stays within range. Oh, you've got your eye on her, eh? Yeah, I'm sorry. The guy's got a massive crush on her, and she is completely oblivious to it. Why else would he offer to take her go herb picking in the forest? When they've got enough to worry about slaying monsters. We had broken up into 3 different teams of knights and researchers. The knights had determined it to be the most effective strategy, and the knight commander himself was part of our team. Apparently, since the monsters of the Southern Forest were so comparably weak, Albert didn't usually join the expeditions to it. However, I'd heard gossip from another knight that he came along this time specifically because of us. I knew this was supposed to be his way of saying thanks, but I still couldn't help feeling like we were just being a big pain in the butt. Thank you, I said. We must be pretty deep in the forest now, huh? I guess we're lucky that we haven't seen any monsters. I was pretty sure it must have been at least 2 hours since we entered, but not a single monster had appeared. Was this normal? When I asked Albert, he admitted it wasn't. No. Normally we would have encountered several of them by now. Really? Yes. In fact, this absence is rather unusual. He furrowed his brow as they thought about it, then went to consult with his knights. Huh. I wonder where they all went. It doesn't feel like the calm before the storm. But I sure hope no strong monster like a salamander doesn't suddenly attack us, I thought as I collected herbs along the path toward the rendezvous point. I didn't trouble myself with these thoughts for long. Once we joined up with the other groups in the clearing, we were going to have lunch. Delicious, voices here and there declared as they ate. I was quietly pleased I had helped to make it. Originally, the knights planned to prepare our meals, but considering the sorry state of this world's cuisine, there was no way I could sit on my hands and not pitch in. The soup I flavored with herbs was a big hit. I hear high praise for the meals at the Research Institute's dining hall. Are you the one in charge of cooking these? Albert asked as he examined the soup in his spoon. Albert had peppered me with questions, even while I was cooking, such as what the names of each herb was and why I was adding them to the pot. He reminded me of Johann in that way, who always hovered behind me doing exactly the same thing. I mean, considering they don't normally cook with herbs, of course they're going to be asking questions. One of the researchers told me that Johann and Albert had been best friends ever since they were little. Maybe that explained why they behaved so similarly. Yeah, definitely. No, I only provide the recipes. The chef is in charge of all the preparations, I answered. I can't believe you lot get to enjoy such delicious meals all the time. It makes me wish I could too, he smiled as he took another bite. A look on his face made me happy as well. However, I felt a bit nervous. After this morning's expedition, the knights and researchers had developed a sense of camaraderie. Everyone sat where they liked and spoke to whom they pleased, and the knight commander himself sat right next to me. On my other side was one of the other team commanders. Even with the intergroup mixing, I was the only researcher lumped together with these men of high military rank. Jude had scooted away despite my efforts to rope him in. Jude better watch his back. I'll remember this. Oh boy. Another knight piped up then. I heard you put some herbs in the soup, and I can't help but notice that my body feels warmer than usual. Did one of the herbs have that kind of effect? Yes, that's right. I added, after I answered him, I got more and more questions about cooking with herbs. Of particular interest to the knights were herbs that might enhance snacks like sausages, which they ate while drinking alcohol. A lively conversation about cooking continued all throughout lunch. In the afternoon, we went out for another round of exploration, and when evening came, we returned to the palace. As so many people went on the expedition this time, we decided to assemble at the Third Order's practice field when we got back. We were all exhausted, but because there was no casualties, the researchers were huddled together in small groups, chatting like they had just come back from a field trip. To my surprise, they weren't discussing the rare herbs they managed to procure, but rather the monsters they encountered along the way as well, as the knights who slew them. Yet even after lunch, not a single monster had appeared before my group. One of the knights had even joked, maybe they're just hiding in the bushes, trembling with fear before the knight commander's might. That could possibly be a little bit of the reason, but I think it's because Say was there. Because, I mean, if she's a saint, so she's probably going to be exuding some kind of aura that would scare away the monsters. Maybe. Or at least the weak ones. Albert was considered strong enough to take one or two monsters all by himself, just as you'd expect of the leader of a knight's order. Even so, it was unheard of not to encounter any monsters at all. Unlike us, the other groups had each run into several monsters. Some of the researchers got a chance to fight alongside the knights in a supporting role, blasting the monsters with battle skill magic. The researchers even claimed they had fun as they hadn't gotten to slay any monsters since their time at the Royal Academy. When I heard we were joining a monster-slaying expedition, I prepared myself for much worse. Yet we mowed them down easy as anything. What a letdown, said one researcher. Really, you want a challenge that could possibly kill you? I would be happy if I was able to easily take out some monsters. I know what you mean, said another. It went surprisingly smoothly given how long it's been since I last had to face any monsters. You too? I felt like it went even easier than when I was at the academy. I wouldn't go that far. One of the knights nearby joined in on their animated conversation. You guys thought this was easy too? Huh? We were just saying how strange it was that our movement felt lighter than usual. According to the knight at first, the knights each thought they were having an unusually good day, but after a discussion with their fellows on fighting techniques, they realized that everyone's physical abilities seemed to have increased. I wonder what the reason is, the researcher mumbled, which caused others to start chiming in with their ideas. They all quickly settled on a reason, though. Could it have been the food, someone suggested? That's it. Everyone concluded the soup they had for lunch was the only thing significantly different from usual. Those herbs I added to the soup became a subject of keen interest. The researchers were used to eating seasonal dishes at this point, but such a lunch was new to the Knights. The researchers were now intensely interested in getting back to the Institute as soon as possible to begin investigating this potential new discovery. Despite our exhaustion at the all-clear signal that told us we were released to go home, my colleagues were once more bursting with energy. They were buzzing with ideas all the way back home. 1 week later, in order to research the cause of the change in the Knight's physical abilities, we began our experiments. We cooked under different conditions, ate the results, and analyzed the outcome. That meant not only were we eating a hearty breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and late-night snack, we were munching practically all day long. Pretty soon we didn't have enough mouths to finish off the amount of experimental food we were producing, so we begged the Knights of the Third Order to help us, seeing as we were on such cordial terms with them now. The Knights were only too happy to take us up on the offer, especially after having heard so much about our dining hall's delectable fare. In the end, we deduced that when someone ate food prepared by an individual with cooking skills, their physical abilities increased. Furthermore, cooking skills operated a bit like pharmaceutical skills in that a person who possessed them imbued magic in their cooking. To our delight, we found out most of the dining hall chefs possessed the skill. It went without saying that the chef at the Research Institute possessed them too. Now we get to see her things again. Okay, Sei Takanashi, level 55/Saint. HP 4,867 out of 4,867. MP 6,067 out of 6,067. Battle skills, holy magic level, infinite. It's still an infinite side, right? Yeah, that's the infinite side. Good lord, girl. That means you have unlimited amount of freaking holy magic levels. Production skills, pharmaceutical level 28, cooking level 5. It turned out that I had skill levels in cooking too, which was most likely the root of everyone's physical ability boost during our expedition. Despite eating at the dining hall every day, we researchers had never noticed the buff since our work didn't require much strenuous effort. However, the Knights figured it out right away due to the physical nature of their work. To be honest, I thought there might be another reason why the researchers just never noticed it. Given the skill level factor, it seemed possible to me that my make potions 50% more effective than usual curse also applied when I cooked. If I had a hand in the preparations, my food was bound to have a greater physical effect than that of a chef of equal skill. That very well may have been the reason my forest soup's power had been so obvious to everyone. When I mentioned this theory to Johann, he blanched and forbade me from cooking in a public place ever again, at least not without a good reason. Oh, now she can't cook. That sucks. Hold on. Why? Wait, behind the scenes 1. Are we going to get more insight with Kyle and Ira? Now let's rewind this story a bit, and perhaps take a different point of view. 8 grim-faced people sat at the council table in the palace of the kingdom of Salutania. Together they shouldered a heavy burden. Let's hear your reports, Prime Minister. Dominic Golt said, looking grave. The 8 members of the council included ministers such as the Minister of Military Services and the Minister of Home Affairs, as well as the commanders of each knightly order and the Grand Magus of the Royal Magic Assembly. Seated at the farthest end of the table was the king. Oh, so the Grand Magus has woken. Good. Joseph Hawke, the Minister of Military Services, spoke next. Oh, that's, I'm guessing, Albert's father, maybe? Cool. In a low, strained voice, he said, the situation is yet disappointing. We send our knights in rotation to slay the monsters, and thus far they have managed to endure, but at this rate, in the near future, the monsters will escape the bounds of the forests. The miasma was condensing by the day, and the monsters born from it grew ever stronger. Although the miasma always manifested relatively close to civilization, no one had any solid theory as to why exactly it did so, or what even caused it to take form. It accumulated most quickly and easily in places where humans didn't immediately live, such as forests and caverns. But because these sites were always near villages and towns, monsters born from the miasma would inevitably invade homesteads, leaving human casualties in their wake. Usually routine dispatches of knights were sufficient to prevent the monsters from swarming these vulnerable settlements. However, every few generations, the miasma condensed at a rate that exceeded the one at which monsters could be slain, just as it was happening now. So far, the council had dealt with the rise in monster attacks by sending the knights out more frequently But as the years went on with no sign of relief, the number of expeditions needed to beat back the miasma only increased. The Minister of Military Services and the Knight Commanders of the Knights Order were in agreement they would only be able to hold out for another year or two. Once the Knights succumbed, the remaining monsters would flood out of the miasma and lay waste to every human settlement in their path. Alphonse Hummel, the Minister of Home Affairs, spoke next. We have received reports from nobles across the kingdom. They face many of the same difficulties and cannot sustain the fight. While the royal knights protected the forest surrounding the capital, the kingdom's nobles were expected to slay monsters that emerged in their own domains. However, it was hired mercenaries, not farmers, who faced these beasts. The mercenaries worked together in guilds, and the lord of a region paid them in return for exterminating monsters and keeping the peace. But with the number of monsters now on the rise, the lord's coffers were unable to keep up with the mercenaries' demands. Those fighters' lives were on the line, and they wouldn't deploy without respectable compensation, even if it was in defense of the land where they lived. Normally, if mercenaries refused to deploy, or if there was simply weren't enough of them to face the threat at hand, the palace sent knights to bolster our nobles' forces. Unfortunately, the knights were already at their limit dealing with monsters' incursions around the capital. The court was in no condition to sacrifice troops to any other region in the kingdom. The Prime Minister's frown lines grew deeper at hearing the two reports. He turned to Michael Hoover, the Commander of Special Services. Any updates on the search for the Saint? Michael's tone was somber. Unfortunately, we still haven't found her. In times when the miasma grew too dense, the maiden called the Saint was meant to appear somewhere in the kingdom. Her miasma-cleansing magic was unbelievably powerful and could instantaneously eliminate monsters. The appearance of the Saint would quell the miasma and shepherd in a new era. In every instance of recorded history, the Saint were found somewhere in the kingdom, and thus special services were searching for her. Well then wait, didn't they already try and summon the Saint? And they ended up summoning two people? What are they doing about that? Hello? They assumed at first that it wouldn't take long to find her, but 3 years had come and gone with no sign of the Saint. They continued to scour every corner of the kingdom, knowing that an age of ruin nipped at their heels. Oh wait, maybe this is before they summoned her? Okay. Every time their hunt turned up nothing, they thought perhaps that the Saint simply hadn't been born yet, and returned to places they had already searched in hopes she would make herself known. And yet the Saint still hadn't been found. A heavy silence fell over the room. The Grand Magus of the Royal Magic Academy, Yuri Druis, broke the silence with a whisper. Is it time we turn to legend? Everyone at the table looked at him. Yuri gazed at them each in turn before producing a document for them all to see. There is a rite known as the Saint Summoning Ritual. Okay, this is before that. Okay. Everyone's heard of that. Isn't that just a fairy tale? No, it was truly performed. I have the steps of the ritual written right here. How did you find it? It was written in a grimoire I found in the Forbidden Depository. Can we trust the contents of this book? I cannot say. The instructions for the ritual are recorded, but the steps seem quite complicated. We require a number of mages to perform the spell as well. Our odds of success are, by my guess, 50-50. Such low odds. But it seems to me our chances are better with this than if they are if we do nothing and wait for the monsters to invade. The Saint Summoning Ritual was ancient, created during a time when the Saint had failed to appear, no matter the density of the miasma. The sages of that legendary era pooled their knowledge to devise it, and were in the end able to summon the Saint from a faraway land. However, this ritual that seemed increasingly vital had only been performed once, in the era of the sages who had composed it. Therefore, it was impossible to tell if the ritual would actually work, or if the sages of the present era could even perform it correctly. Furthermore, the ritual required a number of mages and arcane tools, and it would incur a tremendous cost. In a more peaceful time, the kingdom would never have considered it, but all the expense was a trifle in a world nearing the end of its mortal coil. The king had been silent up until this point. Now he commanded perform the ritual. The Royal Magi Assembly will begin preparations immediately. All others continue with their appointed duties. And so the kingdom of Salutania decided to perform the Saint Summoning Ritual for the first time since the era of legend. Against all odds, the ritual was a success. They summoned a maiden from another world. However, there was a minor problem. They summoned 2 maidens. As far as anyone knew, there had only ever been one saint at a time, whether she appeared by natural means or by summoning. Okay, so only one of them is the saint. Okay, so it has to be Say. Was only one of the maidens the saint? Or both of them saints? Or was neither of them the saint they had been looking for? The only one who might have determined that was the Grand Magus himself. Unfortunately, he fainted as soon as the ritual was completed. Even now, he remained in a deep sleep. That wasn't the only problem. It was only the day after the ritual that the leaders of the kingdom learned 2 potential saints had been summoned. The day of, the crown prince who supervised the ritual of his own volition informed the king that it was an unequivocal success. That was the sum of his report. He said nothing of how many people were summoned. Oh, so he didn't tell his dad that he had summoned 2 people. Okay, but I still get why he initially thought that Ira was the saint and was so adamant that Sei wasn't. Following the crown prince's initial report, the leaders of the kingdom briefly hoped that they would finally find some peace. However, on the following day, they found themselves bewildered when they learned that for some reason the crown prince had only spoken to one of the saints and had seen fit to leave the other one behind. On top of that, the other saint had immediately tried to vacate the palace in her anger at being treated in such a manner. Thankfully, a knight managed to change her mind about leaving, but it was frightfully easy to imagine that she now had a dreadful impression of the kingdom. Yeah. Upon hearing this, the king said wearily, what the hell was he thinking? He wasn't thinking. At least not thinking with his head, anyway. Well, probably his top head, but whatever. One night, a month after the saint summoning ritual, the sun had set and all was concealed in darkness. 2 men relaxed over a bottle of wine at Count Valdek's villa in the capital. One of them was the second son of the Valdek family and the owner of the estate, Johann Valdek, who was also the head researcher of the Research Institute of Medicinal Flora. The other was Johann's best friend since childhood, the third son of the Hawk family and knight commander of the palace's Knights of the Third Order, Albert Hawk. The 2 often joined each other at the Valdek estate to drink, though they hadn't had much time for it recently as Albert was so often on the hunt for monsters. The last time they were able to enjoy a night together, they had been well over a month ago. I heard you recently brought on someone... Oh yes we did, Johann grinned. Albert had tried to bring up the topic casually, but Johann suspected that this was the true reason. Albert had gone out of his way to make time to meet up at the Valdek estate. What's she like? Albert asked. Extremely normal. Normal? She's no different from the other researchers. Though Johann answered in a roundabout way, Albert was too curious to let the topic drop. Johann always dodged Albert's questions like this, even when he knew the answers. It was his way of teasing his overly earnest friend. Albert knew what Johann was up to, so he was amused rather than annoyed, though. He gave Johann an exasperated look to prompt him to continue. Satisfied by the expression, Johann finally gave his friend the answer he sought. For now, she hasn't voiced any complaints about the palace, and she takes her work quite seriously. I see. I heard she was infuriated by her summoning, and that she gave a mage a look so menacing he nearly wet himself. I heard something similar. Those fellows always try to put on airs, but now they're bowing and scraping to get into her good graces. You think so? Of course. The day the saint summoning ritual was performed, Albert was on another monster-slaying expedition, so he only knew bits and pieces of the story from hearsay. Among these bits, he heard one of the saints was now employed at the Research Institute of Medicinal Flora, where Johann was the head researcher. He figured asking Johann directly about her would yield more answers more quickly, so he searched out his old friend. Johann readily told Albert the story of how Sei, the potential saint, came to the institute. How first, about 2 weeks ago, a woman with black hair and black eyes began visiting every day. The first person she spoke to was Jude, but the other researchers, who were all male, soon took interest in this woman who was equally invested in herbs. Black hair and black eyes. She has brown hair and brown eyes in the anime. And on the cover. Maybe it looks brown to them, black to them, I don't know. Early on, Johann felt apprehensive at the sight of Sei, what with her unusually colored hair and eyes. A few days before, he had run into his older brother in the palace corridors and learned that not one but 2 saints were summoned. One was a girl with brown hair and black eyes, and the other was a woman who had black hair and black eyes. What the fuck? Okay, now I'm confused. What's up with the eye situation? And the hair situation per se? Given that, Johann immediately contacted his brother after his first meeting with Sei. On hearing that a black-haired, black-eyed woman was frequenting the institute, Johann's brother promptly called him to the palace. Johann was directed to a room where he found himself facing not only his brother, but an official with a high-ranking title. As they sat across from one another on gilded sofas, Johann's brother confirmed that the woman visiting the institute was one of the women who had been summoned. Then he politely pleaded with Johann to take her in at the Research Institute of Medicinal Flora. Why is this being asked of me? Johann wondered. Although this woman was still only one of the potential saints, the true saint was equal in rank to the king. In truth, she might even be even more invaluable than the king, considering the fate of the world rested on her shoulders. Why, oh why would they want to leave someone so critically important in a tiny research institute sitting on the far corner of the palace gardens? When Johann asked as much, the official took out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his brow and gave an answer through gritted teeth. As a result of the crown prince's behavior, Say had an absolutely awful impression of their country. In fact, after the crown prince left her behind, she tried to leave too, not just the room, but the kingdom itself. Though they had managed to somehow stop her from exiting the palace, and the official persuaded her to remain in the kingdom, the state of affairs was still messy to say the least. There was no precedent for two saints appearing simultaneously, let alone two being summoned by a ritual. At present, those in the palace were of the opinion that only one of them was likely to be the saint. However, because they were traveling through uncharted waters, and it could yet be that both maidens were saints, and therefore it could be dangerous to let either of them go. For now, they were determined to keep both women, just in case, because they don't know who the saint is. Luckily, Say was proving interested in the palace's herb garden and had taken to going there every day. The official hoped that by establishing a deeper friendship with the other researchers, she might develop better feelings toward the kingdom. In other words, you're ordering me to clean up Prince Kyle's mess, Johann said. Our original plan was to give her a tutor that would teach her about the kingdom. That's more or less what has become of the other potential saint who Prince Kyle has sent to the Royal Academy, the official replied. So, since you've already lost her goodwill, you're planning to let her do whatever she wants in order to curry her favor. That's correct. Though we're in no state to take things slow. Still, knowing you, you've already seen a list of demands in home affairs. Ah, you do know me, Johann grinned, and raised his glass to the official. It seemed that the official's assumption was that, as a noble, Johann understood the palace's position and would have any problem taking her say into his care. However, Johann didn't care for the official's attitude or the carelessness that had led to him trying to heap new burdens on Johann and his researchers. So he put on a troubled expression, pretended to think, and then began to list a book's worth of reasons for why he would have to decline. Wouldn't it be hard to say to travel all the way from the palace to the research institute every day? There were some people who lived at the institute for that same reason, and what would they do if she said she wanted to do the same? Even if she did concede to living in such conditions, wouldn't it be problematic to forbade her to reside in the filth of a working institute? That could remodel one of the floors perhaps, but the institute simply didn't have room in its meager budget to afford something like that. Johann came up with problem after problem, and at length got the official to give him every concession he desired. As Johann's brother watched him casually force the official to agree to remodeling the entire research institute for the saint's sake, his expression stiffened. Johann ignored him. Once negotiations were complete, rebuilding Say's future living quarters became top priority, and they were completed at the unheard-of speed of a single week. Fortunately, the rooms were completed before she moved in. But it's odd. If they were so desperate to improve her mood, why did those officials abandon her to her chambers? Johann mused. What do you mean they abandoned her? Albert asked. She complained about it to the other researchers. Though she was given her own chambers in the palace, they left her completely alone, so she was bored. What do you mean? That's not what I heard at all. Johann raised an eyebrow at Albert's protest. According to Albert, the rumors were that after the potential saints were summoned, one maiden fell unwell and took to bed. Though Say had indeed been exhausted after the summoning, the real reason was that time difference between Japan and the kingdom of Sayutania. At the time of the summoning, it had been morning in Sayutania, but the middle of the night in Japan. Consequently, after being taken to her chamber, Say immediately collapsed on the sofa and fell deep asleep. On finding Say passed out on the sofa in what seemed like a coma, the lady-in-waiting quickly ushered in an official. Given the difference between Say's unconscious state and her fury of just a few hours ago, they only became more convinced that Say's condition was taking a turn for the worse. Her sickly pale skin from the endless days of exhausting work and the dark circles under her eyes from years of sleep deprivation just made her look more frail. The official summoned the court physician and had him examine Say, but thankfully the doctor's diagnosis was that she was just exhausted. There were no signs she was afflicted with some kind of disease, therefore the official arranged for Say to get some proper rest, which included moratorium on visitors. This series of events had contributed to the king's late discovery of the two potential saints. Although Albert still suspected some infighting and panic might have been involved in the officials' reluctance to give the king a complete report. I see. Now that you mentioned it, her complexion was pretty dreadful when she first started coming to the Institute. How is she now? Now? Far better, I would say. Thinking on it, Johann realized Say's early appearance could have easily been interpreted as that of someone prone to poor physical health. Some time had passed since, and her skin was still pale, likely a result of being cooped up in the Institute all day, but the circles under her eyes were lighter, and she looked far sturdier. I see. Is she eating well? What kind of question is that? What are you, her father? Shut up. I just heard that the woman Prince Kyle is looking after hasn't been eating very much lately, and it's become a problem. Is that so? The head chef has tried everything they can think of, but she barely touches her food. His Highness is growing worried that she might faint from malnourishment. Well, considering what Say had said about the cooking that the palace had, yeah, I can understand her not wanting to eat either. Now that you mention it, Say doesn't eat much either. Maybe a spare diet is normal where they come from? Good question, maybe I'll ask her. As Say and Ira had been summoned from Japan, both women found the flavor of the Salutanian cuisine rather lacking. The paltry seasonings meant most flavor came directly from a dish's ingredients, which neither of them particularly cared for. It was for that reason that neither of them had much interest in food, but the Crown Prince was issuing orders left and right out of his concern for Ira, the other potential saint. They had yet to yield any results. Prince Kyle sure is enthusiastic about this, Johann mused. Well, you know how it is, Albert trailed off, but Johann knew what he meant. There were presently 3 princes in the kingdom of Salutania. For generations, the eldest prince had always become king, so the firstborn prince was treated as the crown prince. However, the present second-born prince was an exceptionally talented young man who had attracted the support of a number of factions, one who would rather see him crowned king. In truth, the second prince hoped for nothing of the sort, and the king denied any intent to buck tradition, as it had yet to become much of a problem. However, the crown prince had long been aware he was in many ways his brother's inferior, and he couldn't help worrying about the existence of interests plotting against him. Johann was aware that Prince Kyle had requested to be the one to supervise the saint summoning ritual, because he hoped to garner the favor of other nobles. Unfortunately for him, by angering Say, he managed to do the complete opposite, and now he was feeling even more pressure than usual. Also, Kyle is the crown prince. Okay. Is His Highness still handling affairs related to both saints? Yes, His Majesty is concerned by his son's blunder, but he decided to watch how His Highness handles things, especially since having someone else take over might lead to future conflict. It was lucky for them both that you've managed to ease the mind of the other potential saint. He must be hoping that His Highness can still recover. Especially since a struggle for succession could plunge the kingdom into chaos, Johann sighed. He predicted each such chaos was inevitable if any royal infighting broke out on top of the problems they had already suffered from the miasma. Prince Kyle was tragically apt to give off an unseemly impression and could be a bit impulsive and straightforward, but many thought well of him for his compassion. Plus he had the support of the second prince and his close aides, so there was no real problems facing his ascension. The king no doubt thought that losing a few points in popularity among the nobles was nothing to losing one of the potential saints, or if Prince Kyle could win Say's favor, then there was hope yet. It's still strange that there were 2 of them. I mean, was the ritual actually successful? We've never had more than one saint at a time before, Johann wondered aloud. It was undeniably a success, said Albert. Where's your proof? The number of monsters has begun to decrease. Ever since the ritual, the knights had seen the effect on their regular monster-slaying expeditions. The monsters already in existence hadn't vanished, but the rate at which new ones spawned had slowed, and therefore there were fewer overall. As a result, the knights believed the ritual was a success and that the saint will surely be in the palace. They reported as much to their leaders. They still had no idea which of the women was a saint, or whether both of them were, since the Grand Magus of the Royal Magic Academy, the only person who could ascertain the saint's identity, was still unconscious. But the feeling of oncoming tragedy that had saturated the palace was at last dispelled. I see. It would be good to see things start easing up on your end too, said Johann. Yes, said Albert. My knights are exhausted, as I'm sure you can imagine. Is your next hunt going to be in the western forest? No. First we have a round in the east. Once we finished up with the West, I planned to take a long break, longer than usual in any case. The western forests may be more dangerous than the eastern and northern ones, but the way things are going, I don't expect we should have any problems. Oh. Well, I doubt anything will ever happen to you, but be careful. I will. They had no way of knowing that, in a video game, they had basically triggered a certain ominous flag with that conversation. Yeah, they just triggered a doom flag right there. Let's see. Do I have time to do another one? Maybe. Act 4 skincare products. In the 5th month after my summoning, Jude found me in the middle of distilling an essential of oil from lavender I had harvested in the garden. What are you up to over there, he asked. Is that for a potion? No, it's for a facial moisturizer. That day I was after the floral water that was a byproduct of making essential oils. Since my arrival in this world, I had been forced to engineer my own skincare products. I had a prior interest in homemade cosmetics, but now I was driven by necessity. It wasn't that this world lacked any concept of skincare, just that such lotions were exclusively luxury items targeted at the nobility. Luckily for me, I worked at the Research Institute of Medicinal Flora. I had all the tools and facilities I needed to concoct my own skincare products, not to mention access to any ingredients I could imagine. Huh. So you can put herbs in those too? And flowers, like roses and so forth. I should note, while this world had the concept of skincare, the products were, let's say, unlike potions. Most of the recipes were questionable, as in they contained ingredients I had zero intention of putting on my face in any form whatsoever. I actually tried using potions at first, but I quickly realized that I was on the wrong track. Potions were only meant to cure wounds. They didn't have any moisturizing or heightening effects like I needed my lotions to do. Weren't you making some earlier too, Jude asked? Did you use lavender in them as well? I did, but it wasn't for a moisturizer. Aha, was it something with a different effect? I suppose you could put it like that, though. Generally, the outcome is pretty similar. Is that so? Well, whatever you make, I'm sure it'll be incredibly effective. I smiled wryly at Jude's comment. The skincare products I made were indeed potent. Once on a whim, I imbued one of my lotions with magic while stirring. It came out exceptionally well. The difference in effectiveness between the cosmetics I made with and without magic was like night and day. It seemed my pharmaceutical skill and that 50% bonus curse were to blame. When I realized that my pharmaceutical skill could impact cosmetics, I asked one of the other researchers to try making the same kind of lotion. Just as I expected, his lotion came out quite a bit differently. I had made an inadvertent discovery. The researchers hadn't seen the link between cosmetics and pharmaceutical skill before, and they were pretty surprised. They probably never noticed because, for one, only a limited number of wealthy people actually use skincare products in this world. And two, the researchers were all men who didn't really have an interest in cosmetics in the first place. When I reported this to Johann, along with the persistent interference of my 50% bonus curse, he laughed about how this was like me with cooking all over again, though his laugh sounded somewhat weary to me. Did you start making your skincare products after you came to the Research Institute, Jude asked? Yep, I knew it. He did? I looked at him with a puzzled expression. Jude smiled sheepishly. Since you arrived, you've gotten prettier. Huh? Where'd that come from? I gasped openly, every thought ejected from my brain. I knew it interested him, though, because I could feel my cheeks begin to glow. No man had ever said that to me before. I was unexpectedly shy. Why would you say something like that? It's the truth, though. Jude laughed in a totally not matter-of-fact way, even though he had to see my cheeks were burning. I suppose that between the absence of late-night overtime in this world and my ability to live a well-regulated life, my appearance was changing. My dark circles that had been a universal constant under my eyes for so many years were now vanishing. And my hair and skin were supple and shiny. What's more, my eye cream had somehow improved my eyesight, and I didn't even need glasses anymore. I was wondering how that worked. Because I know she had gone without her glasses in the anime, so now we have an explanation for that too. Back in Japan, my late-night, every-night schedule meant beauty routines and dressing up were way outside my energy quota, so men never really paid any attention to me. But thanks to the changes in my appearance, nights by my brought by my new life, I had kind of started looking forward to seeing myself in the mirror. Still, an unpopular woman is unpopular for a reason. I might have changed on the outside, but inside it was the same mousy old say. On that count, I was completely flustered by the sort of situation. I wound up saying something sharp like, "Oh, stop making fun of me." But for some reason that just made Jude smile even more, though he did seem a little abashed. Okay, let me see. Wait, dang it. I didn't want to do that. This is what I want to do. Okay, I'm going to have to end things here, and I'll see you all next time.